FM, The Source.
All right, 25 minutes before 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. Have you ever known somebody who was successful and you ask them to tell you their story? Well, Robin and I do that all the time. We meet successful people. Chances are, if you're on our show, you've achieved some level of success. So it's easy for us to meet lots and lots of people who are successful. But I want to tell you a little story. When I was younger, I was playing guitar, wanting to be, this performer, guitar guy, like all the music guys that I was influenced by. And the best I could do was get these little bars that paid like $30 a night. It was like so frustrating. I was trying to break into the business, as they say. And I had heard about this thing called the college market. You can play colleges, right? And so I tried to break into the college market, and it was almost as difficult as breaking into the Columbia Records or a mainstream record company, right? It was the same thing. So I'm driving down the road, right? And in the back window of my car is a fly, or a horse fly, I think it was. Mm-hmm. It was a big fly. And it was banging up against the back window. So I opened up the passenger windows in the back. And I said, God, get out. You don't need to be back there. And the thing died back there. It never got through the glass. It thought it could.
Oh,
and
my.
I thought to myself, wait a minute, that's me. I'm trying to break through something that you can't break through. But there is an alternate route if I just look. Mm-hmm. And long story short, I found an alternate route.
Nice.
And I did play colleges for quite a few years, and it was a very rewarding part of my life. And so I want to tell you about a book that reminded me of that story from, like, it feels like another lifetime ago. Mm-hmm. It's called Grit.
Yeah.
It's written by our next guest, Angela Duckworth. And I want to brag about it just for a second because I found it on Amazon, and it is number one in the category of, let's see, I have, it feels like I'm doing an award ceremony here. Number one in the category of professional development. It's number 4 in the personality category, and number 5 in the cognitive psychology category. And she has more positive reviews than almost any book I've ever looked at. And put it this way, 1,061 customer reviews, a 4.5-star rating, which is pretty good. There's always some knucklehead who gives you a 1 because the package was crumpled when they got it in the mail.
Right, exactly.
But this was only let's see, this has been out. It's been out for a couple of years. So listen to the story, though. She's going to tell you the power and passion of perseverance. Angela Duckworth. Again, the book is called Grit. Good morning, Angela. It's an honor to have you on our show.
Good morning. I'm happy to be here.
And where are you? Where are you calling from?
I live in Philadelphia, where I am a professor at the University of Pennsylvania.
Yes. I forgot to mention your credentials. Yes, you've got quite an extent. So breaking into the career you broke into must have required some passion and perseverance.
I think breaking into any career, and really more than breaking in, getting somewhere takes grit. And yeah, I define grit as this combination of passion and perseverance that you sustain over time instead of, having a big, intense bout of engagement and then dropping off, which I think a lot of people do.
And some people drop off, and I want to ask you about that. In my example, hopefully you could hear my intro. Could you?
I did. I love that story. I won't steal it, but I'm going to keep thinking about it.
You steal it. It's okay. Well, if it helps somebody, I think it's worthwhile because I think some of us die in the back window. You know where I've seen this in the same career I was talking about. Other musicians that never got out of the bar market, and they're still there. They're 63 years old. They're still playing in a bar.
Sometimes people ask me, isn't it a problem when you don't give up, right? Like, what if you're the fly and you're just like beating yourself against the window, and isn't that persistence? And couldn't it be a bad thing because you just keep trying and it's, not meant to be? Like, you were supposed to actually go out the other way, right? You're supposed to like go over the top of the, of the glass. And I think the place to be gritty and persevering and stubborn and I'm not going to give up is at the highest level ambition, where you're like, you know what, I want to do something with music. I love music. I love performing. I'm going to be stubborn about that. But when it comes to how you're going to do that, the tactics, like who you're going to call next, what are you going to do tomorrow, I think should be enormously flexible. And really gritty people are only stubborn about their higher level ambition. They're very flexible and quick to give up about how it is that they're going to get there.
You have a variety of interviews in your book, everything from CEOs to sports guys to cartoonists. And it's very fascinating what their perspective on this is.
I intentionally try to study high performers across different domains, because when you see a prima ballerina and a rock musician and a novelist and a CEO, and they all have the same thing in common, then I think you're really onto something. And I think it's that combination of sticking with something and sticking with something that you love. Like, you think about it at night, you think about it in your dreams even. You might wake up on a Saturday morning and before you even get your coffee, you find yourself thinking about it. That kind of sustained engagement is what I see as the common denominator across all of the fields that I have studied.
The people who pick up your book, I think, get that. I think that the people who read your book want to see or learn what they can do to focus more on their passion, more on their perseverance. In my little metaphor, analogy, whatever, that little bug couldn't communicate with other bugs who've been in the same predicament. But as humans, we can read about other people who've done the same thing.
It was Isaac Newton who said, I actually think he was quoting someone else, that, if I can see farther, it is because I stand on the shoulders of giants.
Oh, I love that.
I think people who, read books, listen to shows, talk to other people, they're doing the smart thing, which is to figure out everything that everyone else figured out by talking to them. And then you can go out and make your own mistakes. And, of course, you learn from that too. But it's just efficient, isn't it, to, read the stories of other people and learn from them and get as far as you can that way.
And you learn as a child. You're involved with you're involved with children and their character development, and you refer to it as a science.
The idea of character, of course, is, about as old as humanity, right? I mean, every religion, every philosophical tradition goes back to, the ancient Greeks, talked about character, and they talked about character as, all the things, not just your grit, but also your courage and your honesty and your kindness that would help you lead a good life, not only for yourself, but for other people. And as a mother of two teenage girls and a former classroom teacher, and now, yes, a scientist who studies human behavior, I'm really convinced that the ancient Greeks were right, that, we should actually invest in young people and help them develop these qualities. And as a scientist, I can say that one thing the ancient Greeks didn't have was the scientific method. And we can study these things. There are ways to make your kid brave and kind and honest and gritty. And that's, what I'm devoting my life to.
That's a loving parent right there. And it's a disservice when a parent doesn't do that. We were speaking to somebody yesterday, and he was talking about the Manning brothers, the football players. Archie, right?
And Archie is the dad, and then his two sons.
So Archie's...
And Peyton... and Eli.
Thank you. So Archie's father, and I never knew this, it was named Buddy, right?
Yes.
And he killed himself. And he hinted...
I didn't know that.
The author... I didn't either, but the author yesterday suggested that the father killed himself because he was jealous that the son, which is Archie, was actually doing what he couldn't do. And I thought, oh my gosh, what a slap in the face. Somebody is successful at the thing you couldn't be successful at, and you just made him feel guilty about it. So it's a
Well, I'll tell you a Peyton Manning story. I actually met Peyton Manning, and I know almost nothing about football. So I'm sitting backstage at an event, and and this big guy is in the room, and nobody's talking to him because I don't know why. So I start talking to him, and what do you do? And he was like, well, I used to play football, but I don't anymore. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. How'd you get interested in football? He tells me like, oh, my dad played. I asked him, was your dad any good? He was like, not bad. Of course, referring to Archie Manning. But I'll tell you in that conversation that, Peyton Manning talked a lot about his kids, and he talked about his own upbringing. And he feels that for his character development and his kids, that there's this enormous influence, in his case, positive, from the lessons his dad handed down to him and the lessons that he's trying to hand down to his own kids. So, yeah, I absolutely believe that parents play an enormous role, for good or for bad, and hopefully for good.
And if the parent isn't there for one reason or another, I think a book like yours is next best thing. It's a surrogate to the parent that's not there. I think that's what you're doing with this book. I don't think the book is going to change the mind of a woe is me person. You know what I mean? But I think somebody who's already got a positive attitude about what they're doing is going to have that positive attitude fortified by what you've written in this book.
Well, I didn't really want to write the book. My husband, I don't know what to say, forced me, but he urged me to. I mean, the way he convinced me was he told me that somebody else was going to write a lame book on grit, and that would just annoy me, which got me, to do it. But I will say this. Look, I study high achievers, and again, I'm interested in what they have in common, not what's different from one field to another. And I am struck by, NBA basketball players and computer programmers and like all these different people. They're all readers. They even the ones that I meet that are dyslexic, they're reading, they're listening, to audiobooks, to shows like this. Right. The idea of constantly trying to feed yourself, it's really striking to me. And when I look at people who are lower achieving, they're not doing the same thing. So I think it's good advice. I do it myself.
That's an interesting observation. Yes. The book again is called Grit. It's written by our guest, Angela Duckworth. As I mentioned, it's doing really well online. Is this the first time it's being released as a paperback? Yeah,
it just came out in paperback this week.
Okay, because the book's been around, 2 years?
And I wrote another chapter for it because I, wanted to, say what the book makes arguments based on scientific research that I still believe. But I wrote the book a couple years ago now, and so for the paperback, I added a chapter on what I've learned since I wrote the first chapters in the book, and I answer the 7 most commonly asked questions that I get, and I, hope that update's helpful.
Give us a little sample of what's in the book. I want to be fair to the book. I think I'm so taken by the subject that I think I derailed us a little bit. So let's get back on track. Give the audience some information, maybe some samples of what's in the book.
Well, when I was in graduate school, I had these little girls that were growing up, and I was their mom, and I was trying to figure out how to raise them, as, all parents do. But I had the unusual situation of also being a student of psychology. So one thing that I developed that was based on my, understanding of human motivation was called the hard thing rule. My husband and I made a rule that our kids from a very young age had to do a hard thing, but that everybody in the family had to do a hard thing. And a hard thing was defined by something where you were in a very intentional way, trying to get better and practice, and that you were going to get some feedback on how to get better, and then you would just keep going at it. So it could be piano, it could be ballet, it could be track, it could be swimming, it could be really a lot of different things. The hard thing rule also stipulated that you weren't allowed to quit in the middle. So if you started track, you were going to finish track, even if on the second race you decided track wasn't for you. And then finally, we made our kids, even from the years when they were just in kindergarten, we made them pick for themselves what their hard thing would be. I mean, we made it multiple choice because I didn't want to rent a horse for the time that my daughter said her hard thing was going to be horseback riding. I was like, yeah, no, you can't do that. But here's a set of choices that I can afford. And I did that because I think kids need to learn work ethic, but I also think they need to learn to work hard at something that they have chosen, that they care about. And I think that differs a little bit from Tiger Mom philosophies that say like, we'll just assign your kid to play piano because, that's how to get them into college. I don't think that's the right thing. I think kids should make some choices about where they spend their time, and then they should be, forced to carry through on those commitments. In the paperback, I talk about an additional rule that I have since figured out is also important, and it's called the fun thing rule. And that's because now my kids are teenagers and they're in high school, and I've realized that though they have learned how to work hard and to take feedback and try to get better, they're still struggling to figure out something that they really love. So yeah, they made their own choices, but I don't know that they're passionate about them. So I added this fun thing rule, which is that, in addition to kids having to do something that's hard, they should have to do something that's fun. I mean, let's make sure that all kids are doing something just because it's intrinsically enjoyable. And I think the ideal is this, and I hope you guys feel this way about your work. I hope you think it's hard fun. I hope you think that you work really hard, you're all trying to get better.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I love it. And I think, eventually your hard thing and your fun thing come together to be the same.
No, absolutely. I love what you just said. Let me ask you about your children's friends, if I could, and without being too personal here. And let me set it up just a little background to what I'm trying to ask here. Yeah, I think it was who am I trying to think of? Tony Robbins. I think it was Tony Robbins and probably other people who have said that success is habit forming. Once you have success, you want to do it again and again and again, which is a good habit to have, right? But if you have, but so is failure, and failure can be habit forming, which is kind of weird because nobody sets out to fail, right? And I wonder sometimes, because I've seen this with young people, and then I want to go back to your children's friends because of your role as a parent. I've noticed some people sometimes just have it all. They're smart. They've demonstrated that they've got good work ethics, and yet they're not doing as well as they could do. And then I'll go over to a family gathering or something, and all their friends are coming over, and I get to meet the people that they hang out with, and I go, this is the problem. You not only is success or failure habit forming, but it's also contagious. So if you're not with people who are successful, then you don't succeed. And so as a parent, you have to guide your children, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Go. So the question was.
No. I totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what?
I think your question is like, what do you do then, right? Like, what is the implication of that? Right. Or do I agree? Yeah.
How do you say to your child or to your nephew or to anybody, you've got what it takes, but you're hanging out with, and I hate to say losers, but
it's a good word.
You're hanging out with losers. How do you say that? How do you make somebody realize that they're suffering from a disease that they caught from somebody else that they don't need to be bearing? That doesn't need to be part of their being.
Well, as a mother of two teenagers, I'll say it's, hard to say anything right sometimes with your kids. But first, let me just affirm your intuition, which is that we are really powerfully influenced by the people around us. I mean, you get off the plane in a different country and you find yourself, walking, talking, and acting like the people who are there, because that's what humans are. We're social creatures. Right. So your kids, if they go to a certain school, if they go to a certain, team practice, and there's a culture of that sports team or that school, they're going to start acting that way. So first I want to say, I think you're right. You're really right about the importance of who we're with. I think it's probably during your adolescent years that you are most influenced by those peer, role models. You're a little bit more on your own footing when you're, 25 or 40. So the question is then, what is a parent to do, especially if you feel like your kids are hanging out, let me put it this way, with the wrong crowd. And I think that like talking to them about is honestly like maybe not, they'll just talk back to you and probably not agree with you, and you may not get anywhere. But I do think that you can do things with intention, like, where you send your kids to school, like, doing the advanced work and figuring out which coach you want your kids to be spending 4 years with. And then, without maybe talking about it too much with your kids, just making sure you're setting them up for those social influences that are positive, not negative.
But sometimes when a person gets older, in their 20s or their 30s, they will unintentionally alienate alienate themselves from their family. Maybe they've moved away and their family is a phone call and not, within the same physical location. And then, pretty soon they're just gravitating toward other people. And then when family does call or come over, it's like they're the strangers.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And it's so hard to get traction there, right? When you've already lost some of that relationship. I mean, it's never easy. So I don't want to be glib giving advice like this, but I do think, the most powerful insight is that these influences do matter, and that, to some extent you can pull things in one direction or another.
And again, I think the book is going to serve as that coach, that person that should be in our lives that may or may not be. And even if you are surrounded by people who are supportive and who you have a great networking back and forth with, so that both of you are benefiting from each other, I think it's good to have a coach. And Angela, you probably can't be with all of us, so the book is going to have to do it.
I don't think I can be with all of you, but I'm a big fan of coaching. I'm a big fan of reading. It's a way to get smarter faster.
And you also advocate that people retain their sense of humor. Nothing should be too serious. You have to balance.
You know what Freud said? Freud, who of course was a lifelong observer of human nature, he said that humor was a defense against pain. He said that it was actually one of the best defenses because it doesn't do any harm. In fact, it does good. So there's lots of dysfunctional ways that people deal with pain. They deal with it through addiction. They deal with it through denial. They deal with it through aggression. But humor is one of the best ways to deal with pain, and that's why I think there's this expression: pain plus time equals laughter. And anyway, humor is a great character strength, and I think it's highly recommended in almost all situations.
That's an interesting thing you say that. I think that's a lot about the comedians that bring us humor; those who actually have made a career out of trying to make us laugh. And I think you're right. I mean, look at some of the comedians that have committed. Robin Williams committed suicide. Obviously was working through some pain, but I think the rest of us as spectators, what we get out of their humor is an understanding that we're not alone. Like if they're complaining about the long line at the grocery store, we're thinking, oh, even they've got to put up with that too. All of a sudden, life is, oh, okay, I'm not alone in this. I think that's part of it too. That's why we laugh at it.
Oh, comedians are great psychologists. Most great comedy is just observations about human nature, and they're very astute observations. And so my ambition is at some point to work with Chris Rock or something, so I can, figure out human nature better, but also have more fun than I normally do.
Now he's an interesting character, Chris Rock. I mean, he just runs, the gamut of everything from an actor to a stand-up comedian on the stage. I mean, he's pretty amazing. I think you and he would have a good relationship.
Yeah, well, if you're ever sitting down to talk with him, then you have to direct him toward me.
There you go.
We'll do that.
Was it scary for you to write your book?
It was so painful that I cried, maybe most days. It was so hard. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. When you walk by these airport bookstores and there's just racks and racks of books, I remember thinking I can't imagine how a person could write a whole book. I mean, they're so long. And then when I had to sit down to write my own, it was even 10 times harder than that. But I will tell you something that, I think is actually also true in my research on this. People do not do really hard, worthwhile things without the support of another person. And for me, it was my husband, Jason, who, I was awful to him, blamed him for getting me into this book writing thing in the first place. And, patiently listened to me rant and rave, and then, picked me up again, scraped me off the floor, put me together, gave me a cup of coffee. So I think for me, writing the book was also a lesson in grit and how important it is that we have other people to lean on, and that grit is not being invincible. In fact, grit is being vulnerable and letting other people help you.
Absolutely. And I think once you get your head wrapped around what grit is, then you will, because sometimes they say it's about scheduling. Sometimes they say it's about location. You got to move to LA. You got to move to New York. There's always something that you can figure out a way to do once you have your head wrapped around what grit actually is. Then you can figure it out, like getting out that back window of the car, the back passenger window. I have a copy of the book. Give me a call if you want the one that was sent to us. I found it on Amazon. Angela, do you have a website you want to recommend?
Yeah, I have a nonprofit where we try to give away science for free, especially to parents and teachers, and it is characterlab.org.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Thank you for being on the air with us, Angela. That was an awesome interview. I just loved the conversation. And if we're ever on the air with Chris Rock, we'll say, hey, you got to call Angela.
Yeah. I would appreciate that. I so enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll be right back. This is WOCA Ocala.
Fox News Radio. I'm Lillian Wu. Category 3 Hurricane Lane about 200 miles south of Honolulu after dumping some 2 feet of rain on parts of the Big Island. Fox's Adam Housley is on Maui, where FEMA's urging people to be prepared.
Where we are right now, they expect 12 to 14 inches of rain. It's coming, has not come yet. And behind me, though, the surface really churned up. The system is heading our way and towards the other islands as well. It's really all about a rain and about the possibility of flooding and mudslides.
A spate of new U.S. sanctions against Russia kicking in on Monday.
The State Department announced the sanctions following the poisoning earlier this year of a former Russian agent and his daughter on British soil. The sanctions target certain items the U.S. exports to Russia that could have military uses, so-called dual-use technologies.
Fox's John Decker. And orders for long-lasting factory goods falling 1.7% in July. Fox News report. You decide.
You've got lots of engines in your life. Cars, yard equipment, ATVs, motorcycles, watercraft, you name it. And they all use fuel and oil. These same fluids that make your engine run also create deposits that reduce performance and gas mileage. Gum Out Multi-System Tune-Up removes these gummy carbon deposits and stabilizes fuel and oil, helping restore performance and fuel economy. Get a can today at just $6.47 at your local Walmart. Gum Out. Science in, performance out.
If you wear a denture, are you sure your breath is clean and fresh? Try Polident. It's specifically designed to clean a denture because it's tough on odor-causing bacteria, but gentle on the denture itself. Polident has a 4-in-1 cleaning system with 4 powerful ingredients that work together to deep clean your denture. It kills 99.99% of odor-causing bacteria in laboratory testing and helps to remove stains. Feel confident and clean every day with Polident. Available at Walmart for a low price every day.
Here is your 1-minute news brief. A 29-year-old Summerfield man was arrested yesterday, charged with aggravated child abuse for causing life-threatening injuries to a 3-month-old boy. Doctors at the University of Florida Health Shands Hospital in Gainesville say the baby had several fractures throughout his body that were in different stages of healing. A 20-year-old Florida man who was severely burned while practicing parkour has died. Parkour, by the way, is a training discipline using movement developed from military obstacle course training. The man had climbed onto the roof of a 2-story building and was trying to walk on a power pole when he touched a live wire. The Miami Herald is endorsing a Republican candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives who says her alien abduction experience when she was 7 years old does not define her. Newly arrived Puerto Ricans are suing to have 32 Florida counties print election ballots in Spanish, and the 2 tiger cubs born at Disney's Animal Kingdom last year are celebrating their first birthday. And that is your news brief from The Source.
Hi, I'm Ted Yoho, and 6 years ago, I asked for your help to run the hogs out of Washington. And with your help, we did. Today, some wannabe politicians will say and do anything to get elected, even create super PACs to hide behind, to do robocalls, to tell lies at your home. Lies like I don't support the president, or I don't support a wall for border security, or that I won't repeal Obamacare. Sounds like fake news to me. And I don't believe President Trump would have endorsed me if true. Vote on August 28th. Let's continue to drain the swamp and keep any future hogs out. I'm Ted Yoho, and I approve this message.
Tired of looking at stained carpets, dirty tile, or grout? Call Silverback Restoration, 414-5312. Make your flooring look great again. Stains, pet odors, allergies. Call Silverback Restoration, 414-5312. From serving our country to serving our community. Silverback Restoration, 414-5312.